The lights of old Hollywood never truly dimmed. They glittered, they burned, and they cast long, secret shadows. In the 1950s and 60s, when movie studios ruled with iron fists and scandal could destroy a career overnight, stars learned to guard their personal lives like national secrets. Behind the glamour of red carpets and flashing cameras, there existed a world whispered about but rarely seen. Affairs, passions, and forbidden romances were tucked away in coded conversations and private parties hidden from public view. And in the center of it all, one woman stood above the rest. Elizabeth Taylor, arguably the most glamorous star to ever walk the earth. Known for her violet eyes, her diamonds, and her scandalous love life, Taylor lived as if the rules of the world didn't apply to her. Married 8 times, courted by royalty, adored by audiences, and feared by studio executives, she was more than just a star. She was a phenomenon. But beneath the headlines about her husbands and affairs with men, another story has long lived in rumor. A story that Elizabeth Taylor herself, according to legend, once whispered among friends, the names of women, famous actresses, legends in their own right, that she supposedly loved, admired, or perhaps even dated in secret. The list reads like a roll call of Hollywood royalty: Greta Garbo, Marlene Dietrich, Tallulah Bankhead, Joan Crawford, Barbara Stanwyck, Katharine Hepburn. Tonight, we peel back the velvet curtain. We enter a hidden Hollywood where women loved women, where secrecy was survival, and where Elizabeth Taylor's rumored list of lovers blurs fact, fiction, and fantasy. These are the women she is said to have named. This is their story. Elizabeth Taylor was born in London in 1932, the daughter of American parents who ran an art gallery. When the Second World War broke out, her family relocated to Los Angeles. Her striking beauty, even as a child, caught the attention of MGM scouts, and by the age of 10 she was signed to one of the biggest studios in the world. Her breakout role came in National Velvet in 1944. With her luminous presence and natural poise, Taylor captivated audiences instantly. From that moment on, she was more than a child star. She was destined to become one of Hollywood's great legends. But growing up under the harsh glare of studio lights was never easy. The machine of MGM controlled everything: her roles, her image, even her personal life. By the 1950s, Taylor had transformed into one of the most bankable and controversial actresses of her generation. Films like A Place in the Sun, Giant, and Cat on a Hot Tin Roof cemented her reputation as both a serious actress and a dazzling screen goddess. When she played Cleopatra in 1963, her name became synonymous with excess, scandal, and desire. The production was plagued with cost overruns and chaos, but what truly captured headlines was her affair with Richard Burton. Their love story, tumultuous, passionate, and destructive, played out on the world stage. They married, divorced, remarried, and divorced again, all under the watchful eye of a fascinated public. But even in the midst of this highly publicized romance, whispers persisted that Taylor's private life was more complicated than anyone knew. Her beauty was legendary: violet eyes that seemed otherworldly, raven black hair, porcelain skin. She was a kind of star who didn't just walk into a room. She consumed it. Men fell at her feet, but women, too, were captivated. Friends often described her as magnetic, someone who blurred the line between platonic admiration and romantic attraction. Elizabeth Taylor's love life became Hollywood's favorite soap opera. 8 marriages to 7 men: Conrad Hilton Jr., Michael Wilding, Mike Todd, Eddie Fisher, Richard Burton, twice, John Warner, and Larry Fortensky. Yet beyond those official relationships, Taylor was candid about her passions. She admitted in interviews that she fell in love easily, that she was addicted to romance, that she could never live without desire. It's within this hunger for connection that rumors found fertile ground, because Taylor herself never fully denied the whispers that she was drawn to women as well as men. In a Hollywood that punished queerness with career death, even a suggestion was scandalous. But Elizabeth Taylor seemed untouchable. She lived boldly, with no apologies, and that left room for legends to grow. She became more than a movie star. She became a queer icon, not just because of the speculation about her lovers, but because of her courage during the AIDS crisis. In the 1980s, when the world turned its back on gay men dying in silence, Taylor stepped into the spotlight. She co-founded AMFAR, established the Elizabeth Taylor AIDS Foundation, and raised hundreds of millions for research. She fought, she spoke out, She comforted. She showed compassion when others recoiled. But decades earlier, in the hidden circles of Hollywood parties and private confidences, the story goes that she was unafraid to admit who she found beautiful, that she named names, that she spoke of women whose allure rivaled her own, women like Garbo, Dietrich, Bankhead, Crawford, Stanwyck, and Hepburn. Whether the rumors were true hardly mattered. What mattered was a possibility. The idea that Elizabeth Taylor, the most desired woman in the world, could look at another woman and say, "She is mine." And so the whispers continue. They swirl around her diamond-studded legacy like cigarette smoke in a private club. And the first name she is said to have spoken was Greta Garbo. The first name often whispered on Elizabeth Taylor's secret list is one of the most mysterious women in all of film history, Greta Garbo. Born Greta Lovisa Gustafsson in Stockholm, Sweden, in 1905, Garbo's life was marked from the beginning by contrasts. She grew up poor, the daughter of a laborer, in a working-class district where she dreamed of escape. That escape came through cinema. With her striking bone structure, her heavy-lidded eyes, and her air of melancholy, she rose from department store clerk to theater student to international superstar. Garbo's move to Hollywood in the 1920s changed everything. MGM groomed her into an exotic foreign star, a woman whose mystery became her trademark. In silent films like Flesh and the Devil and A Woman of a Phase, her smoldering presence captivated audiences. When sound arrived, a moment that killed many careers, Garbo's rich, throaty voice only amplified her allure. Garbo Talks became a headline event, and she triumphed in films like Anna Christie and Grand Hotel. But behind the roles, Garbo remained an enigma. She despised the Hollywood publicity machine, rarely gave interviews, and avoided premieres. She earned a reputation as aloof, even cold. The truth was more complicated. Garbo longed for privacy, for freedom in a world that constantly demanded her image. She retired from acting at just 36, retreating into a life of seclusion in New York City, where she lived quietly until her death in 1990. The rumors of Garbo's romantic life have always been as fascinating as her films. She was linked to leading men like John Gilbert, but many whispered that her deepest passions were reserved for women. One of the most persistent names was Mercedes de Acosta, a flamboyant playwright and socialite who had affairs with many famous women. Garbo and de Acosta shared an intense, decades-long friendship that many believe was more than platonic. There were also whispers of entanglements with Marlene Dietrich and other actresses, though Garbo herself never confirmed a thing. Garbo's sexuality remains one of cinema's great mysteries, but her allure was undeniable. Women adored her, men pursued her, and everyone wanted to know the truth. So when Elizabeth Taylor supposedly named Greta Garbo among the women she admired, it wasn't shocking. It was almost inevitable. Taylor herself had the same intoxicating pull. Perhaps she saw in Garbo a mirror, a woman who embodied power, beauty, and secrecy in equal measure. And Garbo, the eternal enigma, was only the beginning. From there, Taylor's rumored list continued with another woman who never played by the rules, Marlene Dietrich. If Greta Garbo was mystery, then Marlene Dietrich was temptation. Born in Berlin in 1901, Dietrich came of age in the cabarets of Weimar, Germany. She learned early how to weaponize glamour, how to use her husky voice, her bold style, and her piercing gaze to captivate. She burst onto the international stage in 1930 with The Blue Angel, a film that introduced her as the ultimate femme fatale. Hollywood quickly claimed her, and soon Dietrich was one of the highest-paid stars in the world. Unlike Garbo, who shunned the spotlight, Dietrich embraced it, but on her own terms. She cultivated an image of sophistication and danger, often blurring gender lines. She wore men's suits with more confidence than most men, smoked with a languid elegance, and played roles that exuded both eroticism and defiance. She was among the first women in Hollywood to openly experiment with androgyny, making her an icon for generations who longed for something outside rigid norms. Her personal life was just as daring. Dietrich was married once but lived separately from her husband, keeping lovers of both sexes throughout her life. Whispers linked her romantically to Garbo, to Tallulah Bankhead, to writers, socialites, and countless men. She herself never denied these affairs, and in fact, she cultivated the rumors. For her, ambiguity was power. Dietrich's career spanned decades, from glamorous films like Shanghai Express to patriotic performances entertaining Allied troops during World War II. Yet beyond her artistry, she was remembered for her boldness. She wasn't afraid to be seen with women in ways that hinted at more than friendship. She wasn't afraid to push boundaries in her fashion and her choices. To imagine Elizabeth Taylor, decades later, uttering Dietrich's name as one of the women she admired, or even loved, feels fitting. Both women shared the ability to captivate, to dominate any room they entered. Both played with sexuality in ways that tantalized and scandalized. And both left legacies not just as actresses, but as symbols of defiance. The list didn't end there. After Garbo's mystery and Dietrich's daring, Taylor supposedly moved on to a woman as wild as Hollywood itself, Tallulah Bankhead. Tallulah Bankhead was the kind of woman who couldn't be contained by the rules of Hollywood, by society's expectations, or even by the scandal sheets that tried desperately to capture her. Born in Huntsville, Alabama, in 1902, she entered the world with both privilege and promise. Her father, William B. Bankhead, went on to become the Speaker of the U.S. House of Representatives, and the family name carried immense political weight. But while her relatives dreamed she might follow a respectable path, Tallulah had other plans. From an early age, she displayed a wit as sharp as a blade and a voice that could fill a theater before she ever set foot on stage. She was mischievous, irreverent, and headstrong. By the time she reached her teenage years, she already had a reputation for shocking adults with her boldness. Moving north to pursue acting, she entered a world of theater and film that would never quite know what to do with her. In the 1920s, Bankhead conquered London. While many American actresses struggled abroad, she thrived in the English theater scene, dazzling audiences with a magnetic stage presence. She became the toast of London, mixing with aristocrats, intellectuals, and artists. Her husky southern drawl and sharp wit made her unforgettable. She once walked into a party and declared to a shocked room of strangers, "I'm as pure as a driven slush." Lines like that became her calling card. But Bankhead's offstage life was just as legendary as her performances. She chain-smoked from morning until night, often lighting one cigarette with the last. She drank heavily, partied harder than most men of her era, and made no apologies for it. Her wit could be devastating. She insulted enemies and charmed friends in equal measure. Few could resist her outrageous personality. She was also unapologetically sexual at a time when women in Hollywood were forced into secrecy. While she entered into a brief marriage with actor John Emery, it was her relationships with women that fueled endless rumors. In private circles, she was open about her desires, counting among her alleged lovers the great singer Billie Holiday, Academy Award-winning actress Hattie McDaniel, and her fellow Hollywood rebel Marlene Dietrich. These weren't just passing names. They were titans of art, each a star in their own right. Bankhead's attraction to them, and theirs to her, was whispered about in smoky rooms, in coded gossip columns, and in scandalized studio offices. Perhaps her most famous quip captures her attitude better than any biography ever could. "My father warned me about men and booze, but he never mentioned women and cocaine." It was shocking, scandalous, and hilarious all at once. Pure Tallulah. She reveled in her reputation as Hollywood bad girl, turning shame into spectacle, refusing to ever apologize for who she was. Her film career, while notable, was never quite as dominant as her theater work. Hollywood didn't know how to harness her. She starred in Alfred Hitchcock's Lifeboat, 1944, earning rave reviews for her fierce performance, and appeared in The Little Foxes on stage, cementing her reputation as one of the finest theater actresses of a generation. But the truth was, Bankhead's real performance was her life itself. On Broadway and in London's West End, she reigned supreme, her gravelly voice and larger-than-life presence unforgettable to those lucky enough to see her live. Hollywood, with its rigid morality clauses and obsession with image, often kept her at arm's length. Studios were terrified of her unpredictability. She was too wild, too outspoken, too impossible to mold into the wholesome archetypes they demanded from leading ladies. Bankhead refused to be a puppet. She laughed at the idea of respectability and delighted in shocking those who tried to tame her. It's easy to see why Elizabeth Taylor, another woman who lived under relentless scrutiny, who defied convention, who refused to be boxed in, would have been fascinated by Bankhead. Tallulah represented freedom in its rawest form. She lived loudly, she loved boldly, and she never apologized for either. In the whispered legends of old Hollywood, Tallulah Bankhead's name comes up again and again when the subject turns to women who loved women. Her exploits, Her charisma and her refusal to conform made her a heroine of sorts to those who longed for liberation in a repressive era. For Tallulah, whether the connection was romantic or simply admiration, Bankhead embodied a spirit that Tallulah herself carried, untamed, fearless, and unforgettable. But the legend doesn't end there. The whispers say Tallulah's secret list extended beyond Bankhead, and the next name was one of Hollywood's most ambitious and complicated queens, Joan Crawford. Joan Crawford's story was one of survival. Born Lucille Fay LeSueur around 1904 in Texas, she grew up in poverty, working menial jobs before clawing her way into the film industry. MGM remade her from a scrappy dancer into a glamorous star, changing her name, reshaping her image, and marketing her as the embodiment of ambition. Crawford's determination was unmatched. She transitioned from silent films to talkies, reinventing herself constantly to stay relevant. In the 1930s, she became the epitome of the rags-to-riches flapper. By the 1940s, she was starring in dramas like Mildred Pierce, which won her an Academy Award. Her career stretched for decades, making her one of the most enduring stars of her era. But Crawford's private life was another matter. Fiercely ambitious and intensely private, she was rumored to have had relationships with both men and women. Her close friendships with actresses and her controlling studio's interest in protecting her image fueled endless speculation. Stories of affairs with younger women and whispers of same-sex dalliances followed her throughout her career. Later in life, Crawford's legacy was marred by her daughter Christina's memoir Mommy Dearest, which portrayed her as abusive. Yet despite the controversy, Crawford remains a figure of fascination, glamorous, complex, and haunted. Her drive to survive the ruthless Hollywood system came at a cost. Crawford was said to be both incredibly generous and brutally competitive, often alienating friends while also fiercely supporting those she loved. In private circles, her sharp wit and intense charm could win over anyone, and many women found her irresistible. Those whispered romances became part of her legend, making her one of the most gossiped-about women of her time. For Elizabeth Taylor to supposedly name Joan Crawford as a woman she admired or dated in secret is no surprise. Crawford embodied survival and transformation, qualities Taylor herself knew well. Both were women who lived under the harshest spotlight imaginable, and both carried secrets the world could only guess at. And still, Taylor's whispered list continued. Another name she is said to have spoken was Barbara Stanwyck. Barbara Stanwyck's journey was born of tragedy and resilience. Born Ruby Catherine Stevens in Brooklyn in 1907, she was orphaned as a child and raised in foster care. By sheer force of will, she turned a life of hardship into a legendary career. She started as a chorus girl before breaking into Broadway and then Hollywood, where she quickly gained recognition for her naturalistic acting style. Her career spanned 60 years, with highlights that included Stella Dallas' Double Indemnity, and later, television hits like The Big Valley. Stanwyck became known for playing strong, independent women, characters who mirrored her own life. Yet, like so many of her contemporaries, her personal life sparked speculation. She married twice but maintained intensely close friendships with women that many believed went deeper. In an industry where such relationships had to be hidden, Stanwyck became adept at guarding her privacy. She never spoke publicly about her sexuality, but the whispers never stopped. Behind the tough exterior, Stanwyck was known to be deeply loyal to those she trusted, creating an inner circle of friends where she could drop the mask demanded by Hollywood. Many who knew her well suggested she lived a double life, publicly the consummate professional, privately a woman who allowed herself fleeting moments of freedom. Those contradictions only added to her mystique, making her one of the most fascinating women of her generation. Her ability to command the screen with quiet strength and understated emotion gave her a timeless quality, and perhaps that was what drew Elizabeth Taylor's admiration. Taylor, too, was a woman who had to live within the harsh confines of fame, and in Stanwyck she may have seen a reflection of herself, a survivor, a fighter, and someone who turned pain into power. For Elizabeth Taylor, naming Barbara Stanwyck among her secret admirations made sense. Both women rose from hardship to become Hollywood royalty. Both projected independence, power, and an ability to thrive in a man's world. Stanwyck may not have flaunted her private life, but she carried an aura of strength that made her unforgettable. And then, there was a final name, perhaps the most legendary of them all, Katharine Hepburn. If Elizabeth Taylor was a queen of scandal, Katharine Hepburn was a queen of defiance. Born in 1907 into a progressive New England family, Hepburn was raised to value independence, intellect, and fearlessness. She carried those traits into Hollywood, where she became one of the most celebrated actresses of all time. Her career was extraordinary, spanning more than 60 years, with classics like The Philadelphia Story, The African Queen, and On Golden Pond. She won 4 Academy Awards for Best Actress, more than any other performer in history. Hepburn was famously unconventional. She wore trousers at a time when women in Hollywood were expected to wear dresses. She spoke her mind, refused to conform, and projected an image of fierce individuality. Her long relationship with actor Spencer Tracy dominated headlines, but whispers persisted about her deep connections with women, most notably her close bond with socialite Laura Harding, which lasted decades. Like Garbo and Stanwyck, Hepburn never confirmed anything publicly, but her image, masculine, independent, and unapologetic, made her an icon of queerness long before the word was commonly used. Off-screen, Hepburn could be as magnetic as she was on camera. Friends often described her as witty, sharp-tongued, and entirely unwilling to play the demure Hollywood starlet. She drove fast cars, swam daily in icy waters, and lived in slacks when most actresses clung to gowns. This rebellious spirit made her a role model for women who longed to live outside rigid gender roles, and it also fueled speculation about who she shared her private life with. Her long companionship with Laura Harding wasn't a fleeting friendship, but a relationship that shaped much of her early career. The two women traveled together, lived together, and became nearly inseparable. In Hollywood's coded language, they were called roommates, but those who knew them well saw a partnership that was deeper, more intimate, and more enduring than what the studios would ever allow the public to know. Later in life, Hepburn carefully curated her public image, ensuring that a decades-long partnership with Spencer Tracy took center stage in the public imagination. Yet even then, her refusal to fit into the mold of Hollywood femininity continued to speak volumes. The very traits that made her controversial in the 1930s made her iconic by the end of the century: independence, resilience, and an unwillingness to compromise. For Elizabeth Taylor to supposedly name Katharine Hepburn as one of her secret admirations or lovers ties the rumor together perfectly. Both women were icons of independence. Both lived life on their own terms, and both became eternal symbols of power and allure. For audiences, the thought of Taylor and Hepburn linked together, whether in fact or in whispered fantasy, feels like the culmination of old Hollywood's greatest untold story. So did Elizabeth Taylor really name these women? Greta Garbo, Marlene Dietrich, Tallulah Bankhead, Joan Crawford, Barbara Stanwyck, Katharine Hepburn as her secret lovers? The truth is, history leaves us with no definitive proof. The list survives in whispers, gossip, and myth. What it reveals is not certainty, but possibility. In old Hollywood, secrecy was survival. To be openly gay or bisexual was to risk career ruin. Studios forced stars into marriages, planted stories in newspapers, and silenced anything that might threaten their carefully crafted images. For women who love women, discretion was everything. Elizabeth Taylor, with her beauty, her courage, and her unyielding spirit, became a lightning rod for these rumors. Whether she truly named those actresses or not, she embodied the freedom to live boldly. And later in life, through her AIDS activism, she proved that her compassion and loyalty to the LGBTQ+ community were not just whispers but undeniable fact. Perhaps that's the real story here. Not whether Elizabeth Taylor dated these women, but that their names, their legends, and their secrets live on together. In the smoky, glittering world of old Hollywood, where truth and myth blur, sometimes the most powerful stories are the ones whispered in shadows. And maybe, just maybe, Elizabeth Taylor carried those secrets with her, a hidden chapter of Hollywood history that will never fully be told.